This is You're Probably Right. Entertainment first, everything else is just bonus. Opinions, all ours. Sometimes backed by research, but never the final word. There are always exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder. If something in this episode resonates with you or you want to reach out directly, you can email the show at yprpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find the podcast on Facebook. Just search You're Probably Right podcast and the page should come up. And if you are listening somewhere other than Spotify, you can find the show there as well. Just search You're Probably Right and follow the podcast so new episodes show up automatically. All right, let's get into it.
Hey y'all, what's up? This is MCM and you are listening to You're Probably Right podcast. Thank you for hanging out again. Please follow, like, subscribe, and anything else you can do to help with the show. I would really, really appreciate it. But I mean, if you do nothing, hopefully you'll enjoy what I have to say. I think this is a touching one today. I don't know. I never really know. Last episode, I thought, I'd gotten there. I thought I was 60 or 70 episodes to some sort of a culminating event. And even though it probably still was, it didn't give me what I thought I was going to get out of it. So here we go. Just going to get right into it. Remember, this isn't a Christian podcast. It is a podcast by a Christian, a professing Christian, someone who loves the Lord, loves the Word of God. And, but at the same time, this podcast is kind of me mostly either riffing or talking about my experiences, my life, adjacent. So you won't hear me call any names from my life, unless it was my siblings. I did that a few times, but I don't even know if I said anybody. Once in a while, I've said a couple of my siblings' names, I think. But yeah, I try to keep everything simple and clean. So yeah, let me just get right into it. So pull up a chair, or keep driving. Pretend I'm sitting right beside you. Or keep shoveling. Or whatever it is you're doing right now. Maybe you're cutting the lawn, washing the dishes, folding the laundry, cooking dinner, crunching some numbers. I won't say other things, but anyways, listen. There's a specific kind of disappointment that doesn't come from actually wanting too much. It comes from realizing that the things you wanted were actually very simple. And somehow, and yet somehow still out of reach for the person you chose to be close to. Not big asks, not dramatic expectations, just basic things that make you feel like you are actually accompanied in your own life. And that is where people a lot of the time get stuck, because when something simple is denied or ignored, you start questioning your own perception. You tell yourself maybe you are framing it wrong. Maybe you are asking at the wrong time, although it feels like it's every time. Maybe you are being unfair without meaning to be. You start shrinking the requests in your own head, making it smaller and smaller, until eventually you're not even sure what you're asking for anymore, because it sure isn't what you were asking for in the beginning. But the truth is, some things only feel complicated when the other person was never planning to give them to you in the first place. Maybe they did before, but that well has run dry for one reason or another. This episode is not about entitlement. It's not about expectations of perfection. It is about the quiet moment where you realize that the care you assumed was mutual was actually one directional. And once you see that, as they say, and as I've said many times, you can't unsee it. Because there is a difference between being connected to someone and being useful to them. And the moment people, well, let me say it this way. And most people don't learn that difference until they're already tired. When you're useful, right? Your presence is welcomed. Your effort is appreciated. Your availability is taken for granted. And really, your greatest ability really is your availability. And
If this sounds familiar, follow the show so this kind of thinking stays close.
Sorry about that. It always freaks me out. And for a while, that feels like closeness. It feels like intimacy. It feels like being chosen. So you give more. You show up more. You offer support, reassurance, patience, time, attention. Sometimes you offer it even when it costs you something to do so, especially when it costs you something. And you do it quietly, without keeping score, because you believe that what you are actually building will eventually hold you to. That belief is what makes the realization hit harder when things change. Because the shift does not usually happen during the conflict, right? Or any conflict. It happens during vulnerability. It happens the moment you stop performing strength and let the truth of your situation surface. The moment you admit you are struggling with something important to you, something that could maybe change your life, something that could do a lot of damage to you. The moment you say out loud that things are not okay, that you have been holding things together by force, that you've been carrying more than you let on, a burden so heavy that words sometimes can't even explain how much pressure you're under, like a pressure cooker. And what happens next tells you everything. Not in words, but in behavior. Some people lean in when that happens, and some people quietly disengage. Not because you did something wrong, though, but because your honesty interrupts the role you were playing for them. If your steadiness was a part of what made the arrangement work, or what was possibly your allure, your struggle changes the terms. For some, they thought you had something you didn't. And when the person you hoped would notice says they did not realize you were having a hard time, it lands differently. Not because you wanted them to be a mind reader, because, well, you start replaying moments. You realize they were never really looking. They were benefiting from you. They were present for what you provided, but not for what you were carrying, and certainly not looking to satisfy any need or to bridge any gaps. That is when you start asking the question you've been trying to probably avoid for a long time. What exactly did this person need me for? Why were they around me? If they couldn't even see when I was unraveling, what are they looking at? What are they looking to? What are they wrapped up in? Because it certainly is not you. This is where the confusion sets in, because you're not talking about a stranger, right? You're talking about someone you're close to, or at least you thought you were close to. Someone you shared time with, intimacy, with trust. Well, someone who had access to you, at least. And yet, when it mattered, they were nowhere to be found in the ways that you actually needed them to. That realization forces a reckoning, not just with the relationship, but with yourself. You start noticing how often you tolerated imbalance because things were mostly good. How often you explained away moments of absence because you did not want to be difficult. How often you told yourself that asking for less was the same as being understood or understanding for them or whatever. However you explained it away in your mind. And slowly you begin to see that what you thought were simple needs were actually diagnostic tools. They revealed capacity. They revealed intention. They revealed whether the connection included you as a whole person or only as a source of whatever comfort, support, stability, relief, whatever you were providing at the time. This episode is about that moment. The moment you realize that once you stop supplying what someone quietly relied on, the relationship does not bend, it just disappears. And in that disappearance, you finally understand what role you were playing, or maybe you're still playing it all along. Not because you're bitter. I mean, you are hurt. Not because you're angry, but because you finally are paying attention to what is actually happening and unfolding right in front of your eyes, instead of what you hoped was actually happening. And from that point on, everything changes, unless, of course, you decide to fool yourself more. There is a kind of connection that feels intense, not because it's healthy, but because it keeps you in a constant state of anticipation. You are never settled. You are never secure. You are always just a little off balance, waiting for the next moment that reassures you that this thing is real and you're on the right track, and that this is probably actually mutual, that this is going somewhere. Oh, it's going all right. And when it works, even briefly, it feels incredible because you've been taking breadcrumbs all along. So when you get a half slice of toast, you know, no meat, but it's a bigger piece of crumb. Not because it lasts though, but because it arrives at just the right moment. When you're tired and about to fall, a little crumb gives you just enough energy to do another mile. When you're vulnerable, when you need to believe that the energy you are pouring into someone actually matters. And that is how it starts. Not with anticipation. Well, well, not with manipulation. How about that? No manipulation that you can actually literally point to. Not with cruelty you can name, but with access, with closeness, with being let in just enough that you feel chosen, just enough that you feel special, just enough they look at you in that special way, or what you think is a special way. You probably shudder at the thought that the special way that they look at you, they probably look at most of the people they have relationships with. Just enough that you tell yourself, this is different from everything that came before. And once that door opens, you walk through it fully, wholeheartedly. You give, maybe financially, maybe emotionally, maybe mentally. You give attention, time. You give patience. You give space. You give understanding that you probably should have saved for yourself. You rearrange your priorities in your life. You put other people on hold. You delay your own needs because it feels right to focus on them. Because you believe that if you show up in this way, if you love this way, if you commit this way, it'll be seen. But what you don't realize at first is that you're not building something together. You are sustaining something alone for the both of you. And that is where the damage happens. Because when someone gives you just enough to keep you engaged, you just enough warmth, just enough affection, just enough recognition, it creates this cycle. You start chasing a feeling that you already experienced once, or a couple times, or a few times. You tell yourself that that version of them is still there. They're just going through a rough patch, so they're unable to focus on you right now. That it just needs the right conditions to come back around again. So you adjust yourself to create the right conditions. You become more accommodating, more patient, more available. You stretch beyond what you can afford emotionally or financially or physically, hoping that the next time will be the time they finally meet you where you are. I feel like somebody's probably out there crying or tearing up a little bit because you know exactly what I mean. But they never did. but they never do. And slowly, without realizing it, you are no longer acting out of love. You are acting out of dependence, not because you're weak, but because intermittent care rewires your expectations. It teaches you to tolerate less while giving more. It makes you confuse longing with connection. That is the part people don't like to admit, even to themselves. Although the proof is in the pudding and it's right before your eyes. Sometimes what we call love is actually attachment to relief. Relief from loneliness, complete loneliness. Relief from emptiness. Relief from not feeling chosen. And when you are in that state, you start doing things you would never advise anybody else you care about know about, not even probably your enemies, to do. You ignore warning signs. You excuse imbalance. You accept explanations that never turn into action. You tell yourself that they're doing their best, even when their best never includes you in the way that actually matters. Maybe you get a kiss when all you needed was a hug. The joke is, well, it's not always consciously, not always maliciously, but they know they are receiving far more than they are giving in any capacity. They know you are investing deeper than they are, maybe deeper than they can. I mean, they know you are overextended or overextending, or maybe they don't. Maybe they're delusional. Maybe they're not even thinking about what you are doing over there. Maybe they're just happy to be getting something. And instead of stopping it, instead of refusing what they cannot reciprocate, they continue to receive because they don't know maybe what else to do. Because taking is easy when someone offers freely and you didn't ask for it. Although it's sometimes difficult for some. And when they offer you something back, it is usually just enough to keep you believing that they care like you do. A thank you, a moment of closeness, a partial effort, a reminder of how good it once felt. Not enough to sustain you, though, but enough to keep you hoping. That's not imbalance. Well, it's not balance at all. It is imbalance. It's maintenance. And the longer it goes on, right, the more you contort yourself to fit into a situation that was never designed to hold you. You make compromises you can't afford. You tolerate dynamics that drain you. You stay in positions that slowly erode your sense of self-worth. Until one day, something happens. You can no longer carry it quietly. So you admit you're struggling. You speak honestly about where you are. You got comfortable. You reveal that you've been holding things together by force, that you've been giving at a level that is no longer sustainable for you. And instead of being met, you are exposed. That's simply it. Not because vulnerability is wrong, though, but because it removes your usefulness. You trusted. The moment you stop being a source of stability, of reassurance, of resources, of emotional regulation, the connection sputters, falters, and the energy changes. The effort fades. Even the breadcrumbs get hauled off and put into their pocket. They realize they've thrown too much on your side. They need to throw some over there to another pigeon. The access narrows. Sorry. And suddenly, you are faced with a devastating realization. They were close to you, but not with you. They accepted your care, but they did not carry you in theirs. And when they say they did not realize how bad things were for you, it lands like a verdict, because it tells you that while you were monitoring their needs, they were not monitoring yours at all. You kind of feel stupid. That is when it becomes impossible to avoid the truth. You were not loved in the way you loved. As a matter of fact, you probably weren't loved at all. Oh, they loved what you gave them. They loved what you supplied. They loved what you meant to them. But you? Nah. You were valued for what you provided, not for who you are or for what you needed. And when you stopped providing, the relationship had nothing left to stand on. The realization, that realization, it hurts, not because you lost them, because you never had them, but because you lost yourself in all of that mud. Who believed? Well, you believed. And you lost that version. You thought things would be different. The version of you that, who thought that if you just gave enough, if you just showed up enough, if you just cared enough for long enough, it would eventually come back to you, and it didn't. And that, it doesn't make you foolish. Maybe a bleeding heart. Maybe a dreamer. It makes you human, though. It means you believed in connections deeply enough to risk yourself, and that's a good thing. It means you loved with sincerity in a situation that rewarded consumption and not reciprocity. And once you finally see that, really see that, you also realize you can't go back. You don't become cruel, though. You do your best not to become cold, but you become more measured, more precise. You start noticing how people respond when you are no longer convenient, when you are no longer endlessly available, when you are no longer a supply that makes their life easier. And you let that information guide you. Not because you're punishing anyone, because the best thing you could do right now is just drop the emotion. And I know that hurts. But you have to realize that you misplaced a lot of care, a lot of time, a lot of emotion, a lot of energy. Because once you understand the cost of being used, you stop confusing breadcrumbs with connection. never contort yourself like this again. And that's the lesson. Once you see this pattern, once you really let yourself sit with it, there is no dramatic transformation that follows. There is no moment where everything suddenly makes sense and falls into place. But what happens instead is quieter. It comes with a lot of thought, a lot of consideration, and in some ways, heavier. You start replaying the moments, not to punish yourself, but to finally understand what was actually happening and what you were participating in. You realize how often you explained yourself when no explanation was actually necessary. How often you gave more, not because it was asked of you, but because you hoped it would be noticed. You remember how many times you felt something was off, but you chose to override that feeling because it seemed easier to keep moving than to stop and confront what you already knew. And that is where the grief lives. Not in what they did, but in how long you stayed loyal to an arrangement, I should say a derangement, an arrangement that was never designed to hold you. And you needed holding. Because when someone has access to your care, your effort, your patience, your body, your time, your attention, and they fail to notice when you're unraveling, that is not a misunderstanding. That's information. That's data. That's data. It tells you exactly what mattered to them and what did not. It doesn't mean they're cruel, though. It does not mean they intended to harm you. But it does mean that harm was done, and it does mean that you were hoping, or what you were hoping for, it wasn't a part of their internal map of madness. And the mistake wasn't wanting it. The mistake was assuming that your willingness to give would eventually be met with the same level of awareness in return. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from realizing you were never truly accompanied. Even while you were close to them, being beside someone is not the same as being with them. And intimacy without attentiveness is not intimacy at all. It is proximity with benefits. When you admit to someone that you're struggling, that you have been barely holding things together, and their response is confusing or distant or absent, maybe you haven't heard from them since. Something breaks quietly inside you, not because you expected them to save you, right? But because you expected them to at least see. And when they didn't even see, you're forced to confront a truth that is painful but necessary. Which is that you were far more present for them than they ever were or ever would be for you. That realization changes you, whether you want it or not. Not in a way that hardens you, though. Not in a way that hardens your heart, but in a way that sharpens your discernment. Well, at least you hope so, anyway. You stop mistaking access for care. You stop mistaking attention for concern. You stop assuming that effort creates obligation. And slowly you begin to understand that wanting Simple things were never the problem. Wanting to be noticed, wanting someone to sense when you are not okay, wanting reciprocity, wanting presence, that does not disappear the moment you become inconvenient. Those are not excessive needs. They are basic markers of relationship that include you as a person, not as just a resource. The change happens after this, and it's not even loud. You don't have to announce anything. You don't have to confront anyone from your past. You simply begin to move differently, hopefully. You give more deliberately, you pause sooner, you pay attention to how people respond when you're not at your best, not just when you are useful, generous, or accommodating. And you accept something that is difficult but freeing, which is that some people were never meant to walk with you beyond the season where you made their lives easier. That does not erase what you shared and what you did, but it does explain why it could not continue once it became visible. Yeah, that's about it, y'all. If this episode has felt close to home, it's not because you're foolish. It's because you cared sincerely in situations that rewarded your silence more than your truth. And that's not a character flaw, but it is a lesson that arrives late for people who give deeply. What matters now is not writing the past, rewriting. Sorry. But choosing more carefully in the future, where you invest your future. Not by demanding more from people who have already shown you their limits, but by noticing those limits earlier and respecting them when they appear. And that's not bitterness. That's not resentment. That's learning. Earned through experience and carried forward with intention. And that is where things begin to change. All right, y'all. This is MCM signing off. You're probably right. Until next time, take care of yourself. Finally.
Hey, come check out You're Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 ducks. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while understand that, listen, sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.
listen. It's getting late and I'm still wide awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the space you take. One day you're here, next day you're gone, and I'm just trying to understand where we went wrong. You only love me in the middle of the night. Then you fade away with the morning light. I need to know, is this for real? Tell me how you truly feel. Oh, yeah. I give my all, you give me half your heart. You say the words, but we just stay so far apart. These mixed signals are tearing me down, lost in the silence when you're not around. Tell me how you feel. How you really feel. Is any of this real? Just tell me, yeah. Tell me, baby. Oh. You only love me in the middle of the night. Then you fade away with the morning light. I need to know, is this for real? Tell me how you truly feel. Oh.